What is up, folks? Casual Dad here, and we are going to do it. We are doing our... Still haven't kicked that cold yet. We are doing our faction review, and we're going to go ahead and ride along with this campaign, and we're going to do League's Votann. We're going to do it with a grudge, with some judgment. Now, real quick about this is somewhat early. I kind of hesitated on doing this, but I'm almost done with the faction reviews. The campaign is up, there's some stuff in the store. Let's go ahead and go with it. The reason I hesitate is of course, because this faction is so new. There are 2 Warlords, and this is the whopping total of all of the bodyguards. Where are my other bodyguards? There's all my legal bodyguards. No, we're going to jump to the other screen for this. Sorry about that. So, there are 2 bodyguards, and I'm just going to keep talking as I jump to them. Not 2 bodyguards, there are 2 warlords, and we'll talk about them real quick first. The first is going to be Uthar the Destined, the High Call. Interesting, comes with shields and inspire, legendary, so he gets those 2 traits up to max level, rank 4. Very respectable melee attack, and with 4 shields and inspire and that melee attack and decent hit points, it's very good. It comes in really well. Or it comes in swinging at a pretty respectable point there. He is 42 points, so he is kind of on the upper, maybe the upper third of the cost scale, and that does mean that he is vulnerable to Big Game Hunter, so those are things to watch out for. But kind of the magic with Uthar is his trait. Eye of the Ancestors. There's a lot in there. I'm going to shorten it. Whenever an enemy card kills one of your cards, it then will take additional damage from attacks, and it's as a minimum. So whenever that card takes an attack, it will take a minimum of 15% of its starting wounds for each attack. Now, the way that works is that if you're going to hit a card with 2 judgment tokens for 5 damage, instead you're going to hit that card for 30% of its starting health, because that stacks. So for each judgment token, it's 15%. I'm actually going to play a game with these guys, so you're going to actually get a chance to see that in action. It's a little bit hard to kind of wrap your head around just reading it. But long story short, they really benefit from kind of lighter shots. So Barrage is incredibly powerful with those judgment tokens, maybe. Now I'm going to talk about that a little bit more too, but it is a really powerful ability that is somewhat reduced by a dependence on losing cards, and it is really only that effective against cards that have a lot of starting health. If they don't, then that minimum isn't going to be very impressive. And also, that is a minimum. It's not on top of the full damage they do. So if it will take a minimum of 12 damage and you do 13, it takes 13. So that's Uthar. That's the High Call. Next up is the newer one, who's very interesting. This is E-tok Warlord. Speak? I'm not good at that. Stats are somewhat less impressive. Quite a bit less impressive. And his hit points are a little bit less impressive. Doesn't have shields. Does have Psychic, so he's one of 2 Psychers in the entire faction. Does have that Psych Warp Surge, rank 2, so he does a little bit of damage when he falls. And then does have up to rank 4 Inspiring Presence. So both of your Warlords do help themselves, and then other bodyguards still on the board when they are played. But this guy is cool. His ability is Null Vortex. And we're definitely going to play a game on this because it's very complicated. First friendly card deployed each turn gains Null Vortex charging. At the start of the turn, the enemy card opposite the charging card will lose its trait and special rule for 2 turns. This occurs before any trait triggers. Those last 2 lines are really important. Number 1, it's only 2 turns, so that trait will come back if you don't kill the card in that time. Number 2, this occurs before the trait triggers. So if you hit a card that has Taunt, and you use this to remove Taunt, you can ignore that Taunt. But if it's not dead in 2 turns, it will get Taunt as if it was just deployed. So that can really kind of mess things up if you don't take care of things quickly. So this guy's ability is incredibly powerful, but there are some definite limitations that hold it back a little bit that I'm going to show you when we play these games. We'll talk about that more in a second. Covered that there. Looking at the bodyguards, building a deck with Votann is fairly easy. And one of the cool things is that all of these cards have pretty respectable stats, especially at kind of a low cost point. 7 points for over 100 hit points, precision shot, and then both a melee attack and a pretty reasonable ranged attack. Of course, that's max, but even that is pretty respectable for 7 points. It's not bad, and they're kind of all on par for that. They're slightly on the expensive side for what they offer, but they're pretty darn intimidating. I'm not going to go through all the bodyguards. We'll actually see them in some games in a minute here. But some of the highlights I mentioned with those judgment tokens, if you do any damage to a card with judgment tokens, it's significantly better if they have high health and multiple judgment tokens. So this guy, with Barrage, go to town. And at 35 points with that Barrage value, this is a good card. Puts him about on par with Morgan Ra, just a little bit slower. And then I'm going to look briefly at the cards I don't have, just to peek at them. We got Big Game Hunter. Ooh, that's a good one. One of these 7-point guys, this guy right here. This guy is a monster for 11 points. 11 points, look at that. Look at that. This guy stacks up neatly with the Tau card that's, I want to say, 18 points. Does 90 max damage and has precision shot, so shoots on the drop. This guy has more hit points. Costs 7 points less. Doesn't do quite as much range damage, but has Big Game Hunter that can do significant damage. This guy's pretty solid and a great bargain. And then they do have the one other Psyker I wanted to make sure to mention. Ema the Stoic. This is a pretty easy comparison to Tigurius, because you got shields and you've got Warp Surge. It's the exact same traits. Cost is lower, but then also the stats are lower as well. Not the same hit points, not the same values, but not bad. Doesn't have the ranged attack, but trades it for a much higher melee attack. Not a bad card. And at the upper end of the cost spectrum, they have a couple 40-point cards that are no slouch. That guy, and then this thing is one of the most expensive cards in the game, but look at that monster. With Big Game Hunter and shields. Oof. Oof. That thing's going to be a beast. Real quick about Votann competitively. Next season, I'm actually going to try to ladder with Votann and see how high I can get. My cards are nowhere near the level where I expect them to be competitive, but my theory about these guys is their traits and stats are so good that we just haven't felt their impact yet because just about everyone's are low level. I think once these guys start becoming powerful, get fleshed out a little bit, start getting leveled rather, I think they're going to make a real quick splash in the competitive meta, if they haven't already and I just haven't seen it. I'm going to jump back to the campaign screen, and I'm actually going to play some games with these guys. Now, one thing I do want to highlight is that they are a little bit awkward to build decks with. Now, that's both because they don't have a lot of cards to choose from, and then also because those cards are fairly expensive. Or not all expensive, but just kind of weirdly costed. Let's see what we got here. I'm going to play around. So if you're looking at building out a deck, the combination of points you get is pretty awkward. And this campaign has my least favorite modifier. It's the modifier where the weather changes, and based on the weather change, you end up... it's up 17, huh? Based on the weather change, you kind of end up buffed or debuffed. I don't like it. One of the big reasons I don't like it is that it is somewhat predictable what it's going to be next, but 2 of the 3 conditions you can have reduce your ranged attack. One of them buffs your melee, so it really favors melee, which is not good for Votann, because they have decent melee cards, but the melee cards level up more slowly and kind of take longer to get good than the ranged cards do. And I talked a couple times about how good Barrage and Big Game Hunter are on their ranged guys. Oh, great. It's also been running really slowly for me. We'll see if I can get in here. I like these guys in melee, they're fine, but they're better in shooting until they get to higher level. So with Uthar, we talked about his trait with those judgment tokens. Again, you do get some benefit from your cards dying, but that's a really risky play because this is a somewhat elite faction where you don't really, there is no faction that really likes to lose cards, and they don't have any endless cards. So these are definitely things to watch out for. But we're going to see some judgment tokens pop up, and we'll look at them in detail. So kind of my go-to strategy for Uthar, your default Votann Warlord, is just to pack in the best stats you possibly can and just play to beat the heck out of your opponent and then use the judgment tokens when they come up. And you can kind of shuffle your cards around to let things die strategically, but you shouldn't have that gimmick be the sort of focus of your game. You want to make sure that first you're focusing on winning the game and worry about the gimmick as it comes up. Another thing to note here too is that those judgment tokens only apply if the card dies from an attack. If this guy were to die from poison, it would not apply a judgment token even to the card that gave him poison. because this is going to be a melee attack, it will apply the Judgment Token. So you saw there was a kill, Judgment Token applied. She will now take a whopping 8 damage. That's the other thing too. It's a very cool ability, but it literally doesn't matter with a card like, with a card that has such low starting health. But if one of these other two guys gets a kill on me, they started with much higher health, that will be much more impactful. And you can see kind of the weather patterns on the side here. I'll try to call out what weather patterns come up as they come up, and then after this I'll look at the actual modifiers in the preparation screen. That was one right there. Ranged attack disabled completely. Super annoying. The good thing is that disables their ranged attack as well, so if I do ranged, it's a ready across the board. So I could go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and punch these guys instead because I'm impatient. And I've got a couple games to show you. And now this is only level 14 in the campaign. I did lose a game not too long ago, but I've been winning back up since. Ooh, that's unfortunate. So we should... Oh, and then I'll get the buffed range. And so that, because clear conditions, range is boon. Okay, I need to relook at those modifiers. I don't like it because of the randomness and also because range is somewhat... this also is a bummer because I think this guy's going to die from poison. And then it's my turn, and now my shooting is debuffed. So you can't rely on shooting in this campaign very well, which is... I mean, it's against Eldar, so you don't really want to try to outshoot them anyway. But yeah, I don't love that. Great moment. This guy got a Judgment Token, started with higher health. 26 damage. That's respectable. If you hit this guy with a low-level card that only has, like 4 melee, instead of hitting him for 4, it's going to hit him for 26. That's good. And that's important to note because a fair number of these cards have pretty weak stats. They either do a good melee or a good ranged, not both. Especially at the cheaper end. Oh yeah, he's going to have at least 2 Judgment Tokens. This is going to be great. Except that I just lost my entire board. Ouch. Good news here is I should be able to beat these guys up pretty good. This guy started with a lot of health, Judgment Token, 99 minimum damage. That's great. I'm still in a bad spot this game, but that shows off how devastating that can be. That'll take minimum 99, minimum 28. That'll be enough to kill it no matter what I put there, so here's what we'll do. She's got the higher melee attack. This card is fantastic. I need to level it up a bit, and doesn't have a ranged attack, which is a bummer, but really gotta respect her. Him, her, no, it doesn't matter. The Berserk. So look, I'm going to hit this guy for 99, I'm going to hit this guy for 28, and this guy for 55, because the minimum is lower than my base attack. 99, 55, dead. Awesome. And that sets me up in a pretty good spot for the next turn, although I am losing shields and I'm up against a guy with target acquired. Now that's kind of good, because he's not going to be able to kill me with these two, I hope. Ooh, except he does have that. Yeah, that Psionic Blast is a problem. But his ranged is off. Yeah, he's got me. Okay, there we go. So you get to see me losing a game, too. Can't ready, because the Psyker will kill me. I can't hit with melee. Well, actually, well... And this is where it's a bump, like that modifier. Ah, such a freaking bummer. So I can do that, but that... let's try it. One advantage of having your ranged attack turns off is everyone's ranged attack is turned off, so you get that free ready that doesn't trigger Psychic, which it would otherwise. But did that save me? No, because the weather popped up that does the range buff. Great. Obnoxious. But you got to see the first game. So that is Uthar, that is the Judgment Tokens, that is kind of the default Votann you're going to see the most often, because the new Warlord is pretty rare. I'll go ahead and play with the new Warlord. And I want to talk about this guy a lot, because this is just fascinating. So Judgment Tokens, very cool mechanic. Not necessarily going to swing a game either way, although it's hard to tell with the weather. Now let's actually look at the modifier here. So it will be plus 50% ranged attack, minus 30% ranged attack, plus 30 melee. There are 4, excuse me, so I missed that first status. No ranged at all. So your ranged is either minus a third, gone, or plus 50%, and it swings around. I just don't like it. I don't like it. It's just too random. Anyway, a couple things about this guy. So his ability triggers when it is the first card you play, but you want to play second, if at all possible, because you want to have as much knowledge of the board as possible whenever you play your card. Choose which one you want to turn off. Another thing here too, target acquired is amazing with that ability. So, because you can put your target acquired card out, and he will then, everyone will hit the thing that doesn't have the ability. It's a pretty good idea to hit that. So this shows you which card has the ability, and it is the first one that you put down regardless of what else happens after. So you can move that card around and choose who's going to turn off. Turned off. And hit pretty hard. That's a good start. Now there are a couple things we're going to note here fairly quickly. So that turned off Taunt on the birds. I'm going to kill them anyway, so it doesn't matter. But it turned off Taunt for 2 turns. If for whatever reason I didn't kill them in those 2 turns, it would then get that Taunt as if it had just been deployed. You can still reapply that ability if one of your other cards dies, and you can redeploy. It's the first card you play every time you deploy. So if I put a new card in front of him, it would turn off his Taunt again. And as far as I've seen, there's no limit to how many times you can null vortex an enemy card. It just happens every time. Another thing I wanted to highlight there from when I killed it, it turns off abilities that are on that card. So you notice that when the Carrion Call died, the Wraithblade still got the bonus damage from the avatar. Because the avatar is not on the board, his ability is global, so it still applies even if the card that is receiving the buff is null vortexed. So if you're up against Rakarth, for example, and you've got a null vortex card, that card will still get the +7 health for any card that dies on the board. That's something to keep in mind with that. Now, that said, if you get the Warlord on the table and hit it with the null vortex, since the Warlord trait is on that card, that does turn it off, which is great. It's late in the game, so it isn't necessarily going to save anyone, and so here again I can turn off a trait. I'm going to remove his Psychic Barrage, which will be great. And then we'll target acquire to smack him in the face. Oh, he's probably going to shoot me, depending on conditions. Yeah, turned off as well, reduces range. Cool. And again, it's only 2 turns. So some abilities where it's really, really good to turn off. Shields, obviously. Taunt, always good just to distract from it, but remember that it will come back if you don't kill it before Taunt goes away. Or if you don't kill it before the Vortex goes away. Poison is a really good one because most poison cards are relatively squishy. So if you can keep them from poisoning your cards for a minute, you can then end up killing them. One of the best ones to remove, though, is Fear. Because Fear just kind of does its thing no matter what else is going on. So if you remove it, you just get no Fear for a couple turns, and if it comes back, it's not, apocalyptic. It's not the same thing as a Taunt, something popping back kind of weirdly in the middle of a match. So that's one where it's really good. Of course, Warlord traits, but then things like Furious Charge, Readies, you can turn those off before they trigger. You gotta remember, they will trigger again if you don't kill that card before those 2 turns are up. Or before you play another card to null vortex it again, but still, it's pretty great. And I really like this ability. I think it's going to be incredibly powerful. I'm still so new to playing Votann, that I forget whenever I'm playing with these cards that they don't also have Judgment tokens, which of course they don't. You can't have both traits, so you can't expect your cards to become more effective against things as those things get kills, which they would with the other Warlord. But yeah, it is cool, and it's such an impactful ability. You trigger that at the right time, in the right place. If you have a high-level deck with this guy, whoa, man, that is it's good stuff. I love this trait. I love what it does for the game. It is fiddly, so it's not as powerful as I thought it was out of the gate. I think it may have been nerfed since it was launched. But oof, man, it is so cool. We've all had those games, I'm sure, where something's dropped and you're like, oh no, it has that trait that completely messes with my plans. Obvious case being Badruck and the Taunt tank. You've lined up your hits, you're going to really start smacking around the big guys. Taunt tank drops, and you're only going to hit that for 2 turns. This is amazing against that. Downside, though, is that of the 2 warlords, Uthar is also very, very good against Badruk. Except, always remember the timing on Badruk. Badruk goes first. So Badruk will get a board wipe before any judgment tokens are applied. So that's something to watch out for. It will be good in your follow-up turn, but before that, it's going to hurt. So we got the Avatar. So this is a fairly tough campaign, because they're not exactly tuned Eldar decks, but it's still Eldar, and they're decent leveled cards against my... decent leveled, he's level 2. Shame on me. But I mean, my Votann cards are like very low level. So, and the Avatar's ability is very good, so even if he himself is not that terrifying, the stuff he puts in play is. Another thing to note is even though this removes abilities and traits, it doesn't apply a debuff. So if I remove his trait to add attack bonus, he still will have the attack bonuses that he's already built up over the course of the game. So he still has the higher attack bonus, he just doesn't gain additional attack bonus if another card dies. So, easy win. And then I'm going to take another quick look at the deck. I may play one more game just to kind of play through it and see how it does. I'm actually going to play a ladder game with these guys, just to see. It may not be very useful because my Votann cards are ranked extremely low, so who knows what I'm going to go up against. But I'll try one game of each just to show you what it looks like. Yeah, so just kind of recap a bit. Very, very impactful. In terms of competitive meta, I do think that these guys are going to actually have a huge impact in the game itself. It's just a matter of kind of getting them to the point where... Where are you, buddy? Getting them to the point where they have the card levels they should. So that's kind of a weird mixed deck. I'll roll with it. I built that at some point when I was thinking about it before, a little bit more than right now. Let's see if I can find a really good case. Probably not, because most of the people who are ranked in below 100 are very low level. So we'll see what this does. So I'm just going to turn his stuff off. Excuse me. So I can deny him that ready. So why not? We'll do it. Unless something else drops that's scarier. Yeah, there's not. We'll do this. There we go. Now this actually is a really good one to demonstrate because, well, and it's probably not going to work out. A scary thing about Shadow Sun is that when she drops, she does that heal all bodyguards to full health. If you can... Ooh, I might be able to pull it off. No, I probably won't. Maybe if he does melee. If you can pull it off, so that you play a new card in front of her, she comes into play, you will prevent her from healing your bodyguards to full. For 2 turns. And if you can take out an extra body card, or you can take... Ooh, actually... No, it's not going to work out, because he's... I'm going to... Yeah. Oh well. For example. But, and that's one of the things about this, is the ability is so powerful, but triggering it is hard. And you saw that ready come back, because that was his second turn. He would have gained it back had he not died. Ooh, wait a minute, I got it. Let's see this in action. Let's see if this works. Let's see if this actually does turn off the healing like I expect it to. So it'll remove the precision shot and the bodyguard heal, so I will comfortably remove this bodyguard. Oh, that is awesome. Okay, so that is really a fantastic matchup. I'm glad I got to show that, and I'm glad I got to experiment with that. Because that's the kind of thing that this card can do, and it just, like, completely throws the game on its head. It is hard to use. It is challenging to use. It's going to rely on luck a lot. But seeing moments like that is what makes it so exciting. I really, really was pretty pumped when I saw this Warlord come out. Then I'm going to do it. Probably heal to full. Ooh, interesting. Okay, so the when played ability didn't trigger. Ooh. That may be an oversight, because I do feel like it kind of is supposed to. But you know what? I'm not super bummed about that. That would have been really awkward to be like, oh, this is awesome, and then she heals back to full for me. But Okay, so that was cool. Let's see how the other guy does. Sorry for all the sniffling. And we're going down to the 40s for Uthar. Where are you, buddy? Beep. And we'll go with that too. Note that that is a heavy ranged deck that then also just has a 37-point guy in there because awkward points is kind of how it worked out. I also, I think, built this before I had my taunt guy, but we'll see. I think he might have been in there. Sweet. Small avatar deck. Hopefully this is actually... At this rank, it's always sort of a toss-up if you're going to find a deck that's just very low level, or if you're going to find a deck that is just one they don't play as their main deck. This may be somewhere in the middle. No, this is low level. Okay, level 1. Yay. So this isn't going to be terribly insightful. But we'll see. Maybe you'll get a couple kills and we'll see some judgment tokens in action, but probably I will just win this one. If this is a really quick match that doesn't really show anything, I will probably play another one just to do it. Look at this little guy, 7 points. Regen, does that like, I really, really like E-tok the Strong. It's just, it's my new mascot. Oh, there's a judgment token for you. And this will take 15 minimum damage. Yeah, even this Medicae, that low level Medicae does more damage than that. Even that. Now the Avatar, though, we can do some significant damage to that. If I don't just kill him first. Go ahead and get that kill on the right. I think I still will play one more game with this guy just to show a slightly different thing. Just because I want to see this actually apply. And that's one of the reasons I want to ladder next season, so we can see these guys really in action against some of the top tier decks and see how they do. And here, right here, he only has 35 damage, does the 60%, so it'd be pretty middling. And this guy's going to take that minimum of 28, yeah. So if you have a really burly card that's taken a couple of judgment tokens, you can really start soaking those up with guys like this guy. 89, 118, gotcha. Oh, especially since the minimum's going to be higher. Couple other advantages. When the computer you play against is deciding what action to take, it does not factor in judgment tokens. So it will act, not realizing that its cards are going to take additional bonus damage. Let me take one more look at this, because I don't think this guy's really what I want here. What do I have at 37? 27. It's mostly ranged. We'll do this. We'll drop this guy. 21A. Kind of mucking around here. But you can see how the points values kind of get awkward very quickly. So I have to remove a card. I don't have all that much that would be with judgment tokens. I really like those. Dr. Neil, I'll remove him. And I end up to 21. There's nothing between 16 and 22. And I've used up all my 7 points, so I can't even do the 22 if I tried. I'll drop this guy too. And then we'll bring in this guy. Let's be 39. Okay, that'll work. But yeah, and that's when I say awkward, it's just because there's so little granularity. It goes straight from like 10 to 25. That's a bad example. It goes straight from like 20 to 40, 30 to 50. Like there's just a big jump from one step to the next. All right, let's see, buddy, what do you got? Okay. Well, it's still going to be a decent game, or a slightly better game, but this guy's still pretty low level. So I will do some more laddering stuff with these guys when we get to that next season. I'm not going to start laddering this late in the season starting at 230 trophies. That's still going to take a long time, even when I start it next season. But yeah, cool faction. Really, really interesting cards. Super interesting mechanics. I just really want to play with it and see what happens. Which is a cool spot to be in. On the tabletop, just to kind of fill the airspace here, I have seen a single Votann army in person. I was playing Star Wars Legion at the local shop a couple months ago, and this guy rolls in with this beautiful, fully painted Votann army. I think it was like I think it was a 2K army. It was a full-size one. And I was just immediately completely floored by how compact the thing was. Had this just little shoebox that carried his entire 2K point army, and it was just so efficient. I was just, yeah. Which, of course, they're compact. They're space dwarves. For those who don't know, they're kind of the spiritual successor to the very, very old school squats that a lot of older 40K players really loved way back in the day. And it's very cool that Games Workshop brought them back as a playable faction and completely reworked them to not be as much of a complete joke as they used to be back in the day. Maybe they were serious back in the day. I don't know. For me, my understanding personally is they were pretty much like just like we have dwarves in fantasy, we need dwarves in space. So they just kind of threw dwarves in space, which is more or less what they still are, but just slightly flavorful enough that it kind of works, and just with such a cool visual aesthetic. I'm never going to collect them. Never say never. I'm not going to collect them anytime soon. But I appreciate that they're there. So there was that. Let me do one more game with the Weird Psychic one, just to show you that too. And if you're still with me, good for you. If you leave, totally get it. But we'll see what we get here. These games have been very short so far, and getting to see some of the mechanics and interactions differently. Let's see what else we've got. Ooh, mask. Ooh. Now, here's the thing. Again, I mentioned that the global abilities, like the mask's attack first ability, are not turned off by this null vortex, unless you hit the mask itself. And even then, I think it only applies to that card. This would be the first time I would get to test that, though. Let's see if I can pull that off, where I have the mask on the board and then another bodyguard, and I'm able to drop a null thing on the mask itself. I didn't really try where to put the null thing. I should have put it on the taunt guy, but that's okay. I kind of want to kill the taunt guy. We'll check what we're going to do. Wow. Wow. Got used to playing these guys melee. I was not ready for that complete shift, but of course, this guy did 40 ranged? Really? Wow. He actually hits pretty hard. Okay. For some reason, I had in my head that this guy does a really minimal melee attack, but of course he's got a gun there. Yeah, nice. And with all this Votann stuff coming out now, we probably are getting some more releases soon. They've talked about just releasing some additional cards just from a different league. So maybe repeats of some cards, that we've already seen, but different colors, different stats, just to mix things up. And I am here for it. It's just it is cool and interesting enough that it definitely deserves a, that's a bummer, to have the card variety to be a fully fledged faction. Now this is a great, oh man, this is when you just want to tag with that target acquired and, fear right there. I do think that, again, one of E-tok's biggest advantages, one of E-tok's biggest advantages is going to be versus fear. Now, a downside here is if I remove fear from one of those cards, I'm still going to have a bodyguard who is affected by fear on the other one. So we'll see. Tag. Now, my expectation is that when I go to shoot this guy, I'm about to shoot this guy, the mask's ability will still trigger, and the World Claimer will still shoot me first. But let's test it. Ooh, interesting. He did not. Unless I just missed an animation there, but I think he didn't. That's a little bit inconsistent with what I've seen. But maybe since it's a constant ability that is actually on them, it applies. But I feel like that is not how that mechanic should have gone. Worked in my favor, so I can't be too upset about it, but I think that was a error. Okay. Did you just get his fear back? No! Oh well, it's only rank 1. Yeah, we gotta test this out. That's pretty cool. Sorry, I'm definitely losing my voice right at the end of this. truck lives. No, let's see what happens here. It's too... Okay, so this is not going to be a proper test because he's already lost enough health that this thing will not attack me first, even if this didn't turn it off, so yeah, that's alright. I could have prevented the mask from attacking first, but I'm going to shoot anyway, so it's not going to matter. Yeah, so you can see the difference between this and the campaign. I do, like, the environmental effects don't trigger, and I do think that Votann at low level are definitely better at shooting than they are in melee. They've got a couple heavy hitters, but the deck on the whole is just better at shooting. Especially with that guy. That guy's a great value. Both of those guys are great values. And this guy's kind of right on par. He's a Phoenix Lord. Nah. And it's melee, okay. I was expecting Psychic. It's an interesting choice because that will not get any kills. But he's lost anyway? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Yeah, there you go. Of the two, I expect E-tok to have a bigger meta impact, but it is certainly easier to play with and win with Uthar. Especially Shielded Warlord, always a nice handicap, and then also just the traits are really good, the melee is good, and the judgment tokens really help if you're up against a small deck with a bunch of really powerful, like really beefy cards. It's absolutely great. It's a little bit like Artemis, who performs really well at high levels. But we've got the campaign up right now that'll give you some free Votann cards. There are a couple packs in the store if you want to go that route, including the actual E-tok Warlord itself. Because occasionally there are new Warlord releases, I really recommend holding on to 500 plasma as a minimum, that you just keep that just in case. But as you're able to, of course. Yeah, that was our Votann faction review. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I believe our last one is going to be Chaos. Save the worst for last. But yeah, so I'll see you next time, and enjoy the game.